Now available on 4K Blu-ray from Dark Sky Films is arguably the greatest horror film of all time, 1974's Texas Chainsaw Massacre, directed by Tobe Hooper. So, do I need to review the Texas Chainsaw Massacre? I guess while I'm here, I probably should. So, Texas Chainsaw Massacre is infamously gory and gruesome and brutal and explicit and traumatic and disturbing and not actually in reality all of those things. Funny enough, this film is renowned as this horrifying film, and people saw people being carved up and dismembered and done all this stuff. You don't actually see much at all in this film. It is surprisingly relatively bloodless. The strength of what is this movie about? It's about an hour and a half. What is this movie about? This is shot in the early 70s in Texas. Group of four youths in a van out on a road trip and decide to explore an old abandoned house. And boy, did they choose poorly in that decision. I'm not going to say much more than that. It's Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Come on, you know what it is. But it's infamous for being this really gory film, and it really isn't. What this film has that really gets under your skin and into your brain and scars you and disturbs you is its tone. From the opening moments of this film, something is off, and it really, really works. And eventually, yes, you get to Leatherface and you get to the chainsaw and you get to the furniture made of bones and dismemberment and all this other stuff that again is mostly implied. It's just the suggestion of what's going on in this film, the suggestion of what has gone on before this film even starts from certain sequences, and just the overall tone and execution. And the opening crawl narrated by John Larroquette, pre-famed John Larroquette, basically saying this story really happened, and we've changed a few names, but this really happened, and it's a terrible tragedy, and we should never forget. This movie never really happened. This is based loosely on the Ed Gein story, which was also what Psycho was based on, and some other horror films have been based on, including films about Ed Gein. Deranged is another one from the same year as this film, actually. It's a little bit more accurate to the actual stories, but it's about backwoods, small town, disturbing acts of brutality and cannibalism and things like that. You've probably seen Texas Chainsaw Massacre. If you haven't, you really should. It is one of the all-time greats. It is not as explicit as you think it is. It is far more disturbing than if it would have been explicit. Cast of then unknowns, most of which didn't go on to do too much, so it has that feeling of you're not watching actors you recognize so much as you're watching these real people, as far as you know. And it is so good a film. So I'm not going to spend a lot of time talking about Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Let me tell you about my history with Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I will get to this actual release, by the way. I first saw this. This is one of those movies that had such a reputation when I was a kid, back when I was really first getting into horror movies and getting into renting horror movies at my local video store on tape in those days. It was one of those movies you kind of were afraid to rent because of the imagery, the poster, who will survive and what will be left of them. A woman being hung on a hook, even the trailers, even the TV spots for this were disturbing. So I finally did rent it, and that original Media Home Entertainment videotape, that murky, dark transfer. I've always said this about this film. It looked like a snuff movie that had escaped from hell, and somehow you were laying eyes on it, and maybe you would be damaged by watching it. Maybe the terror from within this film might somehow get out of the screen and get you. Years later, I had a Laserdisc player, and I bought I don't remember, was it Elite Entertainment, I want to say, put out a really nice edition, or Image, I think it was Elite, put out a really nice edition of Texas Chainsaw Massacre. It's the first time it had been remastered, and first time the movie looked good on video, and it looked so good on video. It was so crisp and sharp, and the colors were bright and vibrant, and suddenly this film that was so murky and visually impenetrable at times was razor sharp. And up to the point where the film gets really gruesome and scary, it looked like a 70s Kodak commercial. It looked beautiful, gorgeous blue skies, vibrant colors, 70s people. And that, to me, made it disturbing and terrifying in a whole other way, because it looked like happy media from the 70s, and then it took a turn toward dark insanity, and the contrast with how good it looked and how rosy and sunshiny everything was to how terrible and dark it gets it worked in a different way. So some people are fans of the old VHS edition. That's how they first saw it, and they're like, "Oh, it wasn't meant to look good." Well, as I always say, I don't think the filmmakers made a movie in this era, at least, intending for it to look bad. That's just how everybody first saw it. So I've seen it in many ways. I've seen it many times. I've owned it on DVD. I've owned it on Blu-ray, and now I own a little visual aid here. This new package for Steelbook, actually, from Dark Sky Films. So you get your Steelbook, which replicates the original poster. I love it when I get the original poster on the cover of something. That's how the movie was originally advertised. I can count on one hand of a very accident-prone shop teacher how many times I think a new edition of a video cover looks better than the original poster, and that's damn few. So you get the Steelbook cover. The back has this removable little houdini here, which basically gives you all the breakdown on what's on the disc. Back of it without that is pretty bland. And then you get your 2 discs, one nestled behind the other. You get a poster, facsimile of the original poster, and I'm a fan of the tagline, "Who will survive and what will be left of them?" And then underneath you get basically the Sally's point of view looking at the family while she's in the dinner table there, and that's under the disc. So it's a really nice package. And it's got a little bit of a metallic, you probably can't see it here, but a little bit of a metallic sheen to everything, which is kind of cool. So the film itself, how does it look? This is this director-approved 4K edition here. I'm really mixed on how I feel about this transfer. I'm not, again, somebody who thinks that horror movies should look terrible. I think they should look as good as they can. I think they should look like whoever made it wants it to look. And Hooper approved this transfer. But to me, the colors are really muted in this. I kept thinking something was wrong with my eyes or my TV, because since the Laserdisc, this has looked good. The color has been not like MGM Technicolor color, but the color has been present in this film. The color looks really dialed down in this. Like it was distracting to me because I'm used to seeing it looking a certain way. And while I'm watching it, I'm looking it up online. I'm looking at comparisons to other releases. There was a German Blu-ray 4K release not that long ago, and that had more color than this does. Even in the supplements, the clips they use of the film back to the VHS era all has more color than this 4K transfer does. I don't know, I haven't done any research as to why this is. It's apparently Tobe Hooper approved. I would have to imagine that the previous transfers were approved by either the cinematographer or the director too. Maybe it's that the previous editions felt like it needed more color to make it look better, and maybe they goosed the chroma on those releases. I don't know. I've seen this film theatrically several times with old prints, and I feel like those prints had more color than this transfer does. I'm not saying the transfer looks bad. I'm just saying it looks not as colorful as I'm used to this movie looking. And it was a disappointment to me, frankly. Like, I'm watching this and I'm thinking, when I received this, I'm like, great, I can get rid of my old DVD or Blu-ray copy of this because this is the new best of the best edition. And watching it, I was like, oh, I may want to keep this for the extras and keep my older versions. I still have the Laserdisc. Keep the older versions I have because I'm used to seeing it that way. When Teri McMinn, I can't remember her character name, when she's sitting on the porch swing, or she's sitting on the swing in the yard and you're looking at the house, and she gets up and the camera, great shot, the camera goes under the swing and follows her from behind, leeringly, I must say, as she walks toward the house. The color of her shorts, the color of the sky, it's gorgeous. And it's this huge contrast between how beautiful that looks and how horrifying things are going to get pretty quickly. This edition doesn't have that. It's very drained. And I don't know, I'm looking forward to the eventual online discussion of this, and maybe Dark Sky can say why that choice was made, or if this was indeed closer to what Hooper wanted. But it's not the way the film has looked for the last 20 or 30, or let's say almost 50 years. And it's strange to me. Again, if you haven't owned previous versions, if you haven't watched this movie a bunch of times before, it probably won't even occur to you. You'll just say, wow, those skin tones look accurate. Wow, this movie looks sharp. This looks great. All of that is true. It's just strangely not as vibrant as I'm used to seeing. When you see Marilyn burns toward the end and she's got blood all over her face and it's always been very red. When she's in the back of the pickup truck and the blood's always been very red. Not as much the case here. Very, very disturbing to me in a different way than the film itself is. So that's the main transfer. I'm going to read to you from this little thing right here, or from my notes over there, what this has for extras, because you want to know this. It looks to me, now I don't have my other copy of this, and I haven't been a person this has come out on video a lot over the years. A lot of them. So I have not kept up with it. To me, it was a movie I love. It's a movie I don't want to revisit too often. It's a film that plays theatrically often enough in the circles that I move in that I'm happy to only ever see this in the theater every couple of years and let myself forget it a little bit so it stays fresh. So I haven't been rebuying it. I've got a version with a lot of extras on some physical media versions, DVD, I think, probably Blu-ray, I don't know. The last time somebody sent me one of these to review, and then I've got the Laserdisc. So I can't tell you if this is all of the extras, but this does a good job at porting over extras from a lot of other versions. I always hope when there's a new release, when there's a 4K, when there's a new best transfer ever, that I can get rid of my previous version to just keep the new one. So what we have here, disc 1 is the 4K UHD new transfer of Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and then you've got just the commentary. So there's not much in the way of extras on this one. I think they just basically devote all of this disc space and bit rate to the film, which is preferable when you're doing it this way. So you've got a commentary with director Tobe Hooper, actor Gunnar Hansen, cinematographer Daniel Pearl. You got another commentary with the actors Marilyn Burns, Alan Danziger, Paul Partain, and production designer Robert Burns. You get another commentary with the writer-director Tobe Hooper. You get another commentary with cinematographer Daniel Pearl, editor J. Larry Carroll, and sound recordist Ted Nicolau. They're all great. Some of them are kind of low-key, but the stories behind the making of this film, it was a bunch of people who had made maybe a movie before, a lot of actors who'd never been in a movie before, a lot of film students out in unbelievable Texas heat, really strange and kind of brutal working conditions. The stories behind the dinner scene are horrifying and grueling. They shot for like 27 hours straight. There was a pile of carcasses outside the house stinking to high heaven. People were like retching and getting sick. It's just, knowing that adds to the horror of that scene. So that's all that's on disc 1. Disc 2 is a regular Blu-ray, not 4K, and it's just the special features. Sometimes you'll get one of these 4K releases where it's the 4K disc and it's a regular Blu-ray disc. So for people who don't have 4K yet, it's a nice way to get a new edition of something and a new transfer of something, but you still have a version of it you can play. And if you eventually get the 4K player or the 4K TV, that disc is there. I feel the same way about some 3D releases. Like, I get a really nice flat version of a movie on Blu-ray, and if it comes with a 3D version, someday maybe I'll have a 3D system and I'll be good to go. The thing may be out of print by the time that happens, but hey. So that second disc, there is apparently one new feature on it. This new feature is a feature-length documentary called The Legacy of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. This is interviews with a lot of contemporary filmmakers, contemporary horror filmmakers about the Texas Chainsaw Massacre. Its analysis, its impressions of it, it's how it influenced their work, it's how it scared the hell out of them, and it's good. I'm not generally attracted to documentaries or extras like this. A lot of times they're done when there's no original people left to talk to, or in this case where you've got the stories again and again in so many places from the people who participated. You want something different, you get a fresh perspective on something. But as a fan of certain types of music, I am never one who's like, oh great, there's a new Beatle TV special on ABC. Oh cool, what is it? It's a bunch of current artists saying why they're great. Well, I already know they're great. I don't need, Gerardo to tell me that. So anyway, I neglected to mention, looking at my notes here, the film itself on the 4K has multiple audio mix options. You've got Dolby Atmos, you've got DTS HD Master Audio 7.1. It's a 7.1 mix of this film. You get a 2.0 stereo version and mono version, which is how people originally heard it in the theaters. So that Legacy of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre is about an hour and a half, if I recall. You get Cinefamily presents Friedkin Hooper. This is really, really cool. This is from 2014. I'll tell you the years on these too, so you can kind of match it up with maybe the releases you do have. It's an hour-long discussion at the Cinefamily Theater in LA of Texas Chainsaw Massacre between William Friedkin, the man who gave us The Exorcist, and Tobe Hooper, the man who gave us Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And I guess they're old friends. Friedkin had seen the film when it came out and was basically taking everybody he could to go see it, and did everything he could to help Hooper get a foot in the door in Hollywood, because he just so thought that Chainsaw was just such an unbelievable film. And it's this talk between these two old friends, and Friedkin asks really great, insightful questions, filmmaker to filmmaker, and is hilarious, and makes really biting and sharp comments about various people and things that are just wonderful. So it's well worth sitting through. It's a great talk. Then you have Texas Chainsaw Massacre: The Shocking Truth. This was a making of documentary from 2002. That is 72 minutes. You get Flesh Wounds, 7 Stories of the Saw. This is from 2006. This is another 71-minute documentary that digs a little deeper with some people. It's a mix of fans and participants, actors, creative people from Chainsaw Massacre, telling some stories that aren't really covered in a lot of these other places. And then with a sense of humor, which was cool. Then you have a tour of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre house with Gunnar Hansen. It opens with really interesting footage from 1993, which was not even 20 years after the film came out, of people who found the house in a severely abandoned state and doing like an urban exploration walkthrough. And then you cut to Gunnar Hansen in, what did we have here? 2000, doing a walkthrough of the house. If you don't know this, the house from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was purchased and moved like 100 miles away and turned into like a barbecue, interestingly enough, a barbecue joint, or just like a sort of nice restaurant. So you can go there. You can go and have dinner at the place where they shot Texas Chainsaw Massacre, and they welcome fans, and you can go through. I mean, it's been renovated a bit, and the film was changed. The house was changed a bit for the film. The scene where Leatherface busts out and grabs somebody and then slams the steel shiny door, which is like one of the creepiest moments in that film to me. That was like a facade that was built inside the house, so you can't really see that doorway, but you can kind of see where that was. Anyway, Gunnar Hansen goes through and tells stories like, right here we did this, and right here we did that. And you see like a kid eating a meal at a table in this nice restaurant. Gunnar Hansen's like, we cut his head off over there. We hung her on a hook over there. It was pretty cool, pretty funny. I love location tour stuff, and this disc, gives us a bit of that. Then you have Off the Hook with Teri McMinn from 2008. That's a 17-minute interview with her, who was very reluctant for a long time to talk about the film. So it was cool to finally get her, because she doesn't participate in a lot of the other extras. That was kind of cool. And I guess at some point she started doing conventions and really embraced the whole thing. You have The Business of Saw, an interview with production manager Ron Bozeman from 2000. My eyes are terrible. Could be 6, could be 8. That's 16 minutes. That's really interesting, where they talk about the making of the film and how the film was sold and financed, and how it was originally the only people who would pick it up for distribution was Bryanston Pictures, who had previously had a hit with Deep Throat about a year earlier, and was run by the mob. So shockingly, I don't know if the people who were behind Chainsaw knew that it was mob run at the time, but shockingly, they never really got all the money they were due for the film. Eventually, they talk about this, it was sold to New Line Cinema, and since then, everybody has gotten their points and their percentage and all that accurately, but that initial gigantic sum of money that was made in 74, 75, I don't know if New Line picked it up until, there's a trailer on here from a New Line release, and it's like 1980. So there might have been a good 6 years, the first 6 years of this film being a phenomena. Very little of that money went to the people it was owed to. Then you have deleted scenes and outtakes. That's very cool. That's 25 minutes. Quality on that is rough. It looks like it's an old video transfer, maybe 3/4 inch tape. And then some of it even looks like it was shot off a Moviola. Some of it is silent with sound effects and music from the film played over it. And some of it is on-set audio. That's very, very interesting just to see, the opening of the film, the flash bulbs are going off and you're seeing bits of a body. You see a lot more of that. You see the original deleted opening. It wasn't originally an armadillo that there's a close-up of at the beginning of the film. They talk about in the extras what it was and why they didn't use that. You actually get to see that footage here, so that's pretty essential. There is Grandpa's Tales, an interview with John Dugan. That's 16 minutes from 2014. That's the actor who played Grandpa in the film, talking about that experience. And he's pretty brutal and honest about how that all went. You get Cutting Saw, an interview with editor J. Larry Carroll from 2014. That's 11 minutes. You get the blooper reel, which is only 2 minutes, but it's kind of funny. It's people falling down. And you get outtakes from The Shocking Truth, which is cool. It's even more interview clips and some goofs in that. That's 7 minutes. You get Horror's Hallowed Grounds for Turner, TCM. A lot of people think Turner Classic Movies. A lot of people think Texas Chainsaw Massacre. I just conflated the two in my head. Horror Hallowed Grounds for Texas Chainsaw Massacre. And that's Sean Clark, who did a bunch of these that were wound up on, I think he had them on a website, but a lot of them wound up on the supplements of various movies they were referring to. And he does location tours. He goes and he finds where movies were shot and tries to set up a similar shot or talk about it or talk to the people who are there now. He also goes through the house with the guy who was at least then the president of the Texas Chainsaw Massacre fan club. And they have interesting, pointing out where things were in areas that were very, very changed. Then we have Dr. W.E. Barnes presents Making Grandpa. And this is a slideshow set to music. It's only a couple minutes long, but it shows its photos taken during the creation of the grandpa makeup application for John Dugan, with him, getting the plaster on his face and on his hands and what the molds looked like. It's if you're into special effects, it's really interesting. It's the kind of stuff that they used to put in not Cinefantastique, Cinefantastique or Starlog or Fangoria or stuff like that. You get a still gallery that's about 3 minutes, and that again, like the same music as the John Dugan Making Grandpa thing. It's some music and then just not a lot of stills that just kind of go by themselves. That's about, as I said, 3 minutes. You get the 40th anniversary trailer. You get 2 different trailers for the film. You get the original Bryanston and then the New Line trailer. And then you get TV spots and radio spots. Those are oddly kind of authored, where normally you get those things and you select it and you can pick one and watch it. You can pick another one and watch it. And they may even tell you how long they are. But this, it all plays through. It's not one video track so much as it is, it'll play one and then the counter will reset and it'll play the other. So it's a couple TV spots, it's a couple radio spots. So that's everything that's on here, which is substantial. It's very substantial, and I think it's a great package. As I said, if you're not hung up on the color thing like I kind of am, my other copy is in storage and I need to find it and look at it and say, do I want to keep this or not? Because the extras are great. I'm not so much of a Chainsaw fan that I would want to watch them all again and again. Some of them I would. The location tours are kind of cool, and some of the interviews are pretty cool and fun, but for me, a lot of extras are one and done. So I personally might wind up getting rid of this if I really prefer the transfer on the older version, which is a shame because this should be the final end-all be-all version. And once again, I repeat myself, I know, if you're not hung up on the color thing, this is a perfect edition of this. The only thing I can think of that I know about that's not on here that might have been nice to have as another supplemental extra was a documentary that was a straight-to-tape documentary, I think before the Laserdisc even came out, that was called Texas Chainsaw Massacre, A Family Portrait. And that had interviews with everybody and a lot of just down and dirty stories of production and how guerrilla the whole thing was. I did miss that not being on here. It very well might be that every story on that is represented elsewhere on this. I don't know. But otherwise, this is a really, really nice set. It is out now on 4K Blu-ray from Dark Sky Films. This is Texas Chainsaw Massacre, the 4K UHD edition.